Hey everyone, I'm John Lynn, the founder and chief editor at Healthcare IT Today. We're excited to bring you another in our series of interviews with top leaders in health IT. And our guest today is Kaustubh Sharma. He's co-founder and CEO at MarianaAI. Welcome, Kaustubh.
Hey John, glad to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, excited for this discussion, our ongoing series of interviews with people in the ambient clinical voice space, and excited to learn about your product. But before we go there, tell us a little bit about yourself and Mariana AI.
Sure. Mariana AI was started by Vishal, who's my co-founder and as CTO, and I around a year and a half ago, so relatively early in our journey right now. And the mission was simple, right? We see healthcare going 10, 15 years down the line in a direction where everything will either be significantly augmented or, just fully driven via AI. And we look at the kind of tools at the ecosystem, the way digitization has happened, and the core tools in the current health tech stack aren't configurable enough to pivot to such an AI first workflow. So that is also quite apparent in how current platforms are adopting AI and the approaches they are taking to this. So with this vision, we started Mariana AI because we wanted to create an AI first workflow, an OS that can handle all the things that AI will do vis-a-vis a provider's healthcare workflow 10, 15, 20 years down the line. And this is relatively early days for us in our journey, but we have started with clinical encounters as the point to solve for.
Interesting. So tell us more about that story behind Mariana AI. How did you get involved? How did the founder, get everything going and to where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. So the story is actually pretty interesting because both Vishal and I, we are neither from the US nor from the healthcare domain, right? So
Okay.
building US healthcare was definitely a tough decision to go with simply because of the lack of experience that either of us had. But what drove us was the fact that Vishal, for example, has a stellar background in creating and productionizing large-scale ML and AI systems, and I mean stellar at a global level, wherein in the past, he has collaborated with professors from Carnegie Mellon University to create state-of-the-art speech-to-text models all the way back in 2014, which are still quite popularly used in open source. Like
Wow.
he has built India's largest AI model with ShareChat, which is an Indian social media company, and in the process also created one of the world's only real-time recommendation system in the which around 2020 was something that only the likes of Facebook, Twitter, TikTok had. And so um, with LLMs particularly, given that Vishal had the opportunity to play around with it quite a bit during his time at ShareChat, we had insights on how to make it, more nuanced for specialized ecosystems, and we were looking for ecosystems where that accuracy, that precision, that customization in the logic that AI utilizes when it comes to, these answers. Matters a lot. And so healthcare stood out to us because the nature of data in this ecosystem is completely unstructured natural language, but it also, along with accuracy and referenceability, requires a lot of precision and simultaneously needs to be configured for the different workflows that providers across the spectrum, across geographies, across regulations have. So this unique requirement that the nature of healthcare brings into the picture made it a perfect fit for the technical innovations that we were bringing into the picture. So we came at it from quite an unorthodox perspective, but having stumbled upon the problem and the state at which the ecosystem was, it was clear to us that it's going to undergo tremendous transformation in the next 10 to 15 years, simply because of the way things currently are and the way things ideally need to be. Right? Not only for the patients, but also for providers, for all the stakeholders in the ecosystem. So from this technical perspective, we chose clinical encounters as the point to build for because that's the heart and meat of the entire ecosystem, right? That's where information around the patient is created. That's where value is given to them. And so we worked our way backwards into deciding that clinical encounters is what we want to solve for because being at the point of care, understanding what's happening to the patient would then allow us to do a lot more as we go down the line. So with this thought process, we in December last year launched Care Platform, So we initially, given that we went from this ecosystem, we spent the first few months speaking with hundreds of different stakeholders, and that not only involves physicians from a variety of specialties, workflows, geographies, but also your chief medical officers, your decision makers at large hospitals and health systems, your health tech consultants, your health tech sales leaders, and your just industry influencers as a whole, to form one, to get a diverse enough perspective, and two, to understand what the nuances of the individual pain points that people are facing, not only with existing tools but with existing workflows across the entire ecosystem. And we learned a few key things. One is, of course, that every provider's workflow is different, right? Which is why if you look at Epic, for example, which is the largest EHR out there, then I've heard this being repeated often enough that no two providers out there would have the same Epic instance or the same Epic workflow because of just how configured and customized everything is. So one, that was, customization was a fundamental need in a platform like AI, not only in this, UI that physicians interact with, but also in the business logic that fundamentally drives the output that AI generates, right? And second, of course, that precision and accuracy are both of tremendous importance, and you can't really produce outputs without either of these. If you look at current LLMs, then they lack both, especially for as sensitive an ecosystem as healthcare. And so we realized that the technical innovation in the model architecture that we are bringing in will solve for both of these and help us streamline the clinical encounter workflow end to end. So sorry for dragging that on quite a bit, but coming to the core of where all of that magic combines, we divide the clinical encounter into three bits. One is even before an encounter starts, let's say the 5 minutes before a patient walks into a doctor's room. There we want to empower the doctor with everything they need to know about that patient in 30 to 60 seconds, right? And we do this by combining the entire longitudinal history that a patient has that we can access from across the entirety of US, right? Irrespective of which provider or system the patient would have visited. Then using this, we create not only a quick synopsis, but also a trend of vitals of key information that physicians would need to be seeing. And all of this is, of course, fundamentally configurable depending on individual and organizational preferences. Then, along with this, because of how important value-based care is becoming and how it's only going to increase, we also simultaneously capture HCC codes because of all this longitudinal data that we have, and simultaneously optimize for the RAF score of a given patient, ensuring that the risk is well adjusted. Then as the encounter starts, all a physician needs to do is start transcription. So one unique thing about MarianaAI is that it's not only deeply integrated with EHRs, but it's also available as a Chrome extension, a standalone platform that you can access via any browser, whether it's on your phone, your laptop, your PC, as well as through a native app on both iOS and Android. And what that means is that the entire spectrum of physicians, whether they prefer their traditional tablets or their laptops or their mobiles, can utilize it in a native manner.
Interesting.
Then,
Yeah, I mean, you're covering a lot of this discussion, and some unique aspects as well. Talk to us more about how this solution compares to other ambient clinical voice ones, and maybe some differentiating features. I could list them all. There's dozens out there. Otherwise, go visit Healthcare IT Today and click on the right side, ambient clinical voice companies. But there's a lot of how does it compare to those existing solutions? Sounds like one differentiator is that kind of synopsis that you're doing with the longitudinal data. The other is the coding. It sounds like that's an emphasis. Otherwise, talk to us about how it compares to the other ambient clinical voice solutions out there.
yeah, so I would say the key differences lie on two different categories. The biggest difference is, of course, the fact that while all of the current ambient solutions are a piecemeal solution, right? They exclusively focus on creating that documentation in the standardized templates that they allow for. We have created an end-to-end platform, right? And what that means is if you look at where a physician spends their time today on a day-to-day basis, then a majority of the non-clinical work is divided into few categories. And of course, documentation is the biggest one of them, but simultaneously responding to patient messages, right? Fetching data from the EHR, which can take 50, 100 clicks depending on what it is physicians are fetching. All of these are things that take up 30, 40, 50, or even 1 hour, 90 minutes for a given physician. So totally combined, this ends up taking up 4.5 hours for an average physician in a given day. And we help streamline all of these tasks, right, throughout the process. And simultaneously, because a major pressing problem in the ecosystem has been how provider organizations have been going into losses over the past 2 to 3 years, right? And something that's only going to exacerbate this year once the COVID stimulus is stopped. So we also simultaneously try to optimize for the revenue that they receive by, again, combining these in-depth sources of knowledge that we have. So if you look at, what drives accurate medical coding, then it's one, an understanding, a nuanced understanding of what happened in that encounter, combined with thorough understanding of the patient's clinical and administrative background, right? And we utilize all of that information to make our output much more reliable. And so how we differentiate from these ambient tools is just this end-to-end approach, which streamlines all the grunt work that they currently do while optimizing for both the major sources of revenue. Now, the second major axis on which we differentiate is documentation itself, wherein
Okay.
if you look at the nature of documentation, then it involves two or three major things, right? It's one, the structure in which it needs to be created. Two, the voice and tonality that a physician utilizes while creating their own documentations. And three, the information that they choose to include and leave out, right? So all of these are highly nuanced, given that every physician has their own preference, every organization has their own standards, and every state and has their own regulations. So because of this, we allow for granular customizability, as I said, not only in the experience that physicians have. This helps, lower the switching costs, because MarianaAI mimics what they currently do, whereas other platforms are typically more rigid and templatized in the approach that they take. Then secondly, in the, of course, voice and tonality that we create, we also try to mimic exactly how physicians currently individually generate, their outcome. And of course, a lot of this is powered by the proprietary, AI innovations that we have brought into the picture to allow for this to happen at scale.
Interesting. So talk to us about the workflow for a clinician. You kind of talked about they could see the synopsis beforehand. It's available on a mobile app or Chrome desktop extension. But what is the workflow? Do they review the synopsis, then they go in, they record? What's and obviously it sounds like there's some flexibility, but what's a typical workflow that you see?
Yeah, I think the most typical workflow that we see is, one which is deeply integrated with EHRs. So let's say with an EHR like Epic, Cerner, or Athena, a physician can open up their EHR or have that instance open as they have anyway.
Okay.
And right with their Epic instance, they can, once they are in the patient chart, open MarianaAI directly. And now, as the encounter is starting, they can quickly view the synopsis there itself, know everything they need to, and then within that encounter, start ambient transcription, which records all of that information, combines it with the longitudinal history and ongoing conversations knowledge to produce real-time clinical decision insights, right? And what this means is, given there's vast amounts of data around a given patient nowadays, a physician can choose what it is they want to see, whether it's something from the patient's past that the patient may have missed out on, whether it's information related, insurance related information on what kind of procedures to recommend given the plan the patient is on, or even alternate prescriptions or newer regulations into the market. So depending on, again, with configurability at its core, depending on what a physician wants to see, we generate this information in real time during the conversation. Then once it ends, we automatically generate clinical documentation in whatever format a physician prefers. So again, something that's pre-configured and predefined at the platform level, and simultaneously also create CPT and ICD-10 codes. So this streamlines, the entire workflow end to end, and this is then seamlessly synchronized back into the EHR. So the physician doesn't have to do anything. It's a simple 3-click process to finish an entire clinical encounter end to end, and that compared to the current average time of 15 minutes per encounter, is something that we hope will save physicians a lot of time and just improve the overall provider and patient experience.
Yeah, that's the promise of Ambient. So when you talk about that, how much of what that whole process is automated with technology, or do you have humans in the background? It's interesting. We're seeing an evolution in this regard, but how do you approach that? Is it all technology? Are there some human scribes? Is there human reviewers? How do you balance that whole technology and human? Obviously, the doctor is in the loop of, is a human in the loop, but how are you approaching tech versus human?
Yeah, in our case, as I said, given that we come from a deeply technical background, everything that we do is 100% driven by tech. And the human aspects are, what physicians provide to us as feedback via the usage of the platform itself. So there's both qualitative and quantitative feedback that we take into account. Qualitative, of course, being through in-depth user interviews and conversations that we have had, but quantitative through the actions that they take on the platform itself. So as I said, right, because we want to mimic the style an individual physician has, we see the kinds of edits they make on the first set of notes that the AI generates, and by understanding the edits, the AI learns what kind of output a given physician needs. So similarly, over time, it grows to learn how a particular physician operates and what kind of things they prefer and what they don't. So this is how, in real time, we are able to do everything exclusively driven by technology.
Nice. And you talked a little bit about the EHR integration. Tell us more about that. How are you integrating with the EHR? Does it work with all EHR or just specific ones? How are you approaching EHR integration?
So, of course, we have unidirectional integration with all EHRs out there. I think ONC's Cures Act has made that to be something that's relatively more feasible than it was a couple of years ago. But we also have deep bidirectional integrations with almost all the major EHRs out there, including your Epic, Athena, Advanced MD, Allscripts, etc. And of course, we are continuously adding newer EHRs on request as well. So I think in terms of the ability to cover the EHRs out there, I think I'm fairly comfortable in saying we'll be able to deeply integrate with all the EHRs out there. And as of now, we already cover, I think, 80 to 90% of the market with the EHRs we are currently integrated with.
Cool. The other interesting question I always find with vendors is, does the clinician have to change the way they're talking about, in the exam room to make this work? Or, and it's kind of a question of what's your onboarding training process for a new clinician?
Yeah, and in general, we have tried to mimic, as I said, how clinicians currently work to replicate not only, the way in which they generate information, but also the individual steps that are part of their unique workflow. And so there's really very little retraining that physicians need to go through. They can normally, interact with their patients the way they currently do. In fact, in a much better and more human manner than they are currently allowed to. But of course, having a microphone is something that, can really elevate the experience, can take that accuracy from, 95, 96 to 99%, depending on the setting and specialty in question. So definitely helps to have a microphone, but given that it's also natively available on iOS, they can just simply carry around their phone wherever it is they go, regardless of whether it's an inpatient, an outpatient, an emergency setting or whatnot.
Sure. Yeah, that's interesting, the microphone aspect. I remember in the early days of voice recognition, that was huge, right? And then they kind of overcame it, and luckily our phones come with pretty good microphones too. The nice evolution. How about when it comes to accuracy? How do you evaluate the accuracy of your solution? And how do you, where are you at, when it comes to, the accuracy?
Yeah, in general, given that we work across multiple problem statements, there's no one unified accuracy metrics that we can use across the platform as a whole. But for individual problems that we tackle, let's take ambient documentation as one of them. We have state-of-the-art accuracy because we utilize existing state-of-the-art models and then apply further layers of cleaning and correction to the outputs that they produce. So in that sense, we already are assured of the best output that can be possibly generated. And we have seen this play out in real time as well, wherein physicians who have utilized or are currently utilizing other tools have in real time compared our output to that of competitive solutions. And we have always performed, fortunately, up until now, better than the examples that we have been compared against. And this ranges from your new age companies to ones which have been around for a long while. So in that sense, I think currently it's again early days for us. We still think that there's a lot of way to go before the accuracy reaches that 99.9% threshold that's truly needed for this to be completely automated, right? But given that, as I said, Vishal, our CTO, has in the past already researched on this, transcription as a problem statement, has built models and is already working on developing this for medical documentation. Particularly, we are quite confident that we'll be able to push state-of-the-art boundaries by another few percentage points over the next few months.
Interesting. And how about when it comes to specialties? Does your product work across every specialty? Are you focused on specific ones? Is it ambulatory versus acute? How are you approaching kind of that specialty question?
Yeah, in terms of specialty, currently we are fairly agnostic, wherein our product is already being utilized across the US by physicians and clinicians across specialties. However, in terms of workflows, we have seen that particularly, let's say in inpatient or ER cases, that organizations tend to significantly differ from each other. Ambulatory is still somewhat similar in its key components, but the other two can differ quite greatly. So while we cater to all of these specialties and workflow, for inpatient and ER, we closely work with large organizations to tailor the flow for what their workflow currently looks like.
Very interesting. So I know that anyone that watches these is going to want to know where they can get a demo so they can see it firsthand. They can test it themselves. Where can people go to learn more and be able to check it out?
Folks can, of course, go to MarianaAI.com and learn more about it. They can also find us across LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, or whatever social media they happen to use.
Awesome. Well, Kaustubh, this is a really interesting conversation, and I think the start of many more. I always like to tell people 6 months from now, we're going to have a whole other story, probably, at least on the same trend line. But this technology is moving quick, so I appreciate you taking time to talk with us and share about MarianaAI. And thanks everyone for watching and listening. If you want to find more great healthcare IT content like this, be sure to check it out at healthcareittoday.com or search for Healthcare IT Today on your favorite podcast applications. Thanks, Kaustubh.
Thanks, John. Wonderful speaking with you. Have a good day.